Welcome to Behind the Story with Naomi and Lisa. I'm Naomi Craig, historical author of Rahab's Courage.
And my name is Lisa Renee. I'm from the Collaborative Press, where we help authors self-publish, and I'm also a contemporary romance author.
Before we get into our special guest today, what are you working on these days?
Okay, so again, been working with Sarah on the Collaborative Press website, and we have some new things that we're going to be doing helping authors. So we're doing an e-magazine, and we are offering authors 3 months free use of our newsletter. So basically they write some articles and they have their links, their social media links, and just though we're sort of wanting people that don't really have a big platform yet, and we're helping them build their platform. So we have, a couple of thousand subscribers that are multi-genre, and yeah, so that gives them that experience and that kind of stuff. And then if they want to, we've got other services to help build their own subscriber list in the meantime. But yeah, and so that's a really cool thing. So that's just on the website. We're not taking just everyone. It will just be a few people from a few authors from different genres. So that's pretty exciting because that's what we like to do, help people that are just trying to get started and get them. So she's been doing a great job on the collaborativepress.com website. It's looking really slick and smart. And she's also, like I mentioned before, helping authors design their websites at a really good price. Because we know a lot of, new authors, they're starting out and they've got a limited budget and that kind of stuff. So we're doing a great service there. And so if anyone wants to check it out, it's the collaborativepress.com, which Sarah has designed the website, and lisareneeauthor.com if they want to see what it looks like. So yeah, so that's been fun. What about you, Naomi?
My pre-order, I sent that off to a couple of betas, so I'm kind of nervous because I need you guys holding my hand, apparently. So I'm nervous that it's going to real people before you guys have seen it. So hopefully, I'd want it to be the best 5 chapters I've written, but I guess that'll be yet to be seen. But trying to reformat and get my social media back in track. So trying to get in a groove that works for me and for my schedule and hopefully get seen. So
yeah, things are changing. So that's it. That's why we're hearing a lot of that, people building their own website, having readers come direct to them, newsletters, and then you've got a bit more of an influence. So if things like Facebook change this one changes this and your posts aren't getting seen, it's good to have a bit more control and say over that. You put so much effort into trying to get these readers and connections and followers. And so, yeah, it is a bit of a interesting time for authors at the moment. Great. So who have we got on for today, Naomi?
Our special guest today is author Karin Beery. Karin writes hopeful fiction with a healthy dose of romance. Her books include Summer Plans and Other Disasters, Practically Married, and her upcoming release is Avoiding Marriage. Karin also offers a host of editorial services through Right Now Edits and is the managing editor for Guiding Light Women's Fiction at Lighthouse Publishing of the Carolinas. When not engaged in writerly pursuits, she enjoys time at home in northern Michigan with her husband and fur babies. Karin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, for those who are not familiar with your work, Karin, tell us a little bit about you and what you write.
Well, like Naomi said, I write hopeful fiction with a healthy dose of romance. I didn't originally want to admit that I wrote romance novels, but just have discovered that I really don't understand the point of a novel without romance in it. So why not just embrace it and write romance? Although I think I do tend to lean a little more towards women's fiction with romance in it. But really what I'm writing are stories that represent my Christian beliefs, but they don't have a strong Christian theme or storyline. I just want to write entertaining, clean stories Right now, they're all, I would consider almost Hallmarky because there's not a whole lot of tragedy that happens. But there's enough tragedy in the world. I don't like to focus on that when I read. I want to be just entertained. If you're looking for deep emotional, heart-wrenching stories, I will not be offended if you don't pick up my books because that's not what you'll get. But yeah, if you're looking for just a nice, easy read and something that's going to have a happily ever after, you'll probably like my books.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the seeds will be planted too. If you're putting in you as a Christian writer, it's going to be filtering through that lens, and those who have ears to hear are going to hear that. So, well done. They're fun books. I really enjoy them. Now, your upcoming book, Avoiding Marriage, releases April 30th. Tell us about Avoiding Marriage and what sparked the story.
So this is actually a Practically Married novella. So I'm taking one of the characters from Practically Married, and it is the character of Jess, who appears briefly. I won't ruin it for you, but she is the hero's ex-girlfriend in Practically Married. And she is a smart, successful, beautiful blonde woman. And I have a friend named Jess, who is a smart, successful, beautiful blonde woman. And she's like, why did you make me the crazy ex-girlfriend? So she's not crazy in the book, but I wanted to kind of figure out what would make Russ fall in love with someone like Jess and what would make him end the relationship with her. So I just kind of started exploring that and came up with a short little story that I liked. And I wanted to make sure that I had another book coming out this year as well. So the more I got to thinking about it, I just, I found Jess's kind of dug into who she was as a person and found her character and came up with a hero who would be a little bit different and maybe somebody that she wasn't, type of character that she wasn't exposed to on a regular basis in her work. And kind of threw them together to see what would happen. And it came out as Avoiding Marriage.
Awesome. So may I ask how many chapters or how many words, like roughly, when you say novella, because there's a lot of scope change with novella?
Yes. Word count, it's about 111, or excuse me, page count. It's about 111 pages long.
Right.
So it's a short one. It's definitely something that you could sit down, depending on how quickly you read. You can read it in a day or a weekend, definitely.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. So what inspired you to start writing, and how many years have you actually been writing?
I have actually started kind of taking it seriously in 2007, and I started writing because my husband had been diagnosed with cancer and I needed an escape because he was in the hospital. He was getting chemo treatments. He had a couple of surgeries. And his chemo treatments, he would get it for 5 hours a day and be kind of exhausted. And there was a bookstore near the hospital. So I would go down and just cruise books. And I started reading. And it didn't take long to read through all of the authors that I liked. And then you get to the point where you're not sure if you want to spend the money. And because of the cancer, I didn't know if I should spend the money on books by authors that I didn't know yet if I was going to like them. So I decided, well, I'll just write my own. So I wrote 80,000 words in 6 weeks. Wow. And decided to start submitting it. I've never written anything that quickly since then. It takes me like a year now to write. But just started the submitting process. And long story short, it took 10 years before I signed my first contract. And my first book was released in 2018. But along the way, I discovered that I just really enjoy publishing. I actually now consider myself an editor who writes. I love editing. First drafts are the bane of my existence. I hate them. They just torture me. But once I get the book written and I can start editing, that's when I really enjoy it. My husband is fine now. I always start that story and forget to tell people my husband's fine. He's been cancer-free for years now. But it was just, it was what I needed at that time to escape and have my own time while he was going through his stuff. So
awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of readers do like that, life can be up and down. There's always something to deal with eventually. Something crops up, and sometimes you have to deal with that. You have to deal with that issue. You can't avoid it, but then there's moments you do need to take a breather and escape into and have your mind thinking about different things, whether that's reading a book, going for a walk, enjoying nature, I find that really helps me when you're going through tough times. So awesome. So you're saying it's a big gap from when you first wrote and to when you published. So what advice would you give to someone first starting out writing their first book? What, if you could give advice to your younger self when you first started writing, what would you say?
Just stay teachable. That's, I think, when I talk with new authors, and I've gotten involved online in many writers groups and author groups on Facebook and on Twitter and things, it's kind of easy to tell who's going to make it and who's not going to, because there are those people who ask for advice and take advice. And then there are those people who ask for advice and then tell you why they don't need to take it. And the fact of the matter is, it took me 10 years to get my first contract, but I spent 10 years learning. I've just not only learning how to write, but learning how to edit, learning as much as I could about the publishing side of things. So when I give advice now, it's not the advice of someone who just had their first book published a few years ago. Now we're looking at, over a decade of trial and error and, sitting at the feet of people who know more than me. So when I give advice, it's not to tell you how much I know, it's to actually help a writer. So as long as they're teachable, really the sky's the limit, because it doesn't matter how well you can write. If you won't listen to the advice of people with more experience, you're closing your own doors.
Yeah, so kind of along those lines, as a managing editor, what is something that instantly turns you off for submissions? Like, can you tell from an email that someone's unteachable, or is there another thing that's a red flag for you?
Well, I publish it's Guiding Light's women's fiction. And when I get a manuscript and the main character is a man, right away, I'm like, you didn't read, the information, you didn't read my submission guidelines. And now I have received some submissions, because the difference between women's fiction and romance, it can be a very thin line. And I've received a couple submissions that the stories were great. And I know these authors worked with editors. I was excited for them, but I just couldn't sign them with my line because it wasn't women's fiction. But I had no problem whatsoever going to the romance editor. And in one case, it was the suspense editor. And I forwarded the manuscripts. I said, you're going to want to take a look at these. And in one case, I'd met the author at a conference. I knew he was working hard. I knew what was going on. I'm like, I can't publish this, but go ahead and take a look at it. And he's got a signed contract now, and his book will be coming out, I believe, in 2022. But when I get a manuscript and it's either got a ton of Christian content, because I do publish general market, clean general market fiction. So nothing that's going to break biblical principles, but I don't want conversion stories. I don't want Bible studies, things like that. So when I get a book and right off the bat, it's someone has this tragedy and they're going to go to church and rediscover their relationship with the Lord, I don't even keep reading, because I don't know how you can write about your relationship with the Lord without there being overtly Christian content in the story. So there is a lot to be said. Just read the guidelines and, submit what they're asking for. Make sure you know what you're sending. It saves everybody a little bit of time, and it saves you some heartbreak too. You're not going to be rejected as often if you're sending to the right people.
Definitely. So in your submissions with the women's fiction, mm-hmm. How many manuscripts or inquiries are you getting?
I am still relatively new. So I came on board with Guiding Light in 2018, and we made the transition, had just made the transition from Christian to general market, but the line itself was only about a year and a half old. So I am still very new in the market, Right now, I'm only getting, maybe 1 or 2 submissions a month. So if anybody has submissions, please send them to me.
Oh, you're going to get a lot now.
Just read the guidelines, make sure it fits.
So so you're getting the submissions, what jumps out on the page when you know, oh, this is a winner, I want to know more about it, I want the full manuscript? What's something that draws you in?
For me, I want to see a progression. So I don't want to see, and I'll be honest here. So this isn't going to be the same for all publishers or agents. I don't really, a synopsis is okay, but we all know a synopsis is like the worst writing we're ever going to do, because how hard is it to take your novel and put it down into a page and a half? So I only want to read like 1 to 2 pages, maybe. I don't want any more than that. And that's just giving me a rough idea of, is this character actually going to face conflict? And are things going to happen in the book? Because there are generally 2 big issues that I see when I get a manuscript. One is that nothing happens. You just kind of watch the character float through life. And you can see that in the book because, she gets up and goes to work. She gets up and goes to work. She gets up and goes to work. Well, we all do that. That's not why we read fiction, because if we want to see someone do that, it's just our lives. The other one is I just want to see conflict happening. A lot of people tend to think that the internal conflict is enough, and that's the key part of the story, because you want to see the character change, but I want to see that things are going to be happening to this character. So, the book starts and she just wants to open a coffee shop, and I want to see that the town wants to bulldoze the building that she's going into. So she finds another building, and then it burns down. And then, the insurance comes through, but it's in somebody else's name. And I just want to see that there's going to be conflict and that something's happening. So if those 2 things are there, I will definitely pick up the manuscript and read through it.
Excellent. So we talk about women's fiction and Christian fiction and clean and wholesome reads. So do you want to give us a definition of what is accepted as far as clean and wholesome? Obviously, it's, no swearing, sex on page and all that kind of stuff. But, so you're okay to having the Christian characters, or it doesn't really matter? What are you after? And how Christian can they be? It's just like, we go to church, but I can mention that, but they're not really saying much. What's the guideline there?
What I'm looking for is really, a lifestyle that reflects a Christian lifestyle. And yeah, if they're going to go to church, that's fine. I don't want to see them sitting in church and listen to the pastor's sermon. Not because that's not important, but just because we want to see what's happening with this character, not necessarily with what the character's, hearing or reading. If the character's studying to become a doctor, you don't want to read the textbook with them. So as far as, clean and wholesome, I'm really looking for clean. I define clean and wholesome differently. When I think of wholesome, I think of kind of like the Waltons or Little House on the Prairie, where there's usually some sort of more family friendly. I like to tell people that wholesome is going to be more like a GPG rated story, something that you might see on network television that's family friendly, where there's not going to be the sex and the violence and the swearing, but also it's a little tamer of a story. I give example of the TV shows like the Waltons, Little House on the Prairie. A lot of like the 1980s and 1990s sitcoms I would consider wholesome, Growing Pains and Full House and those kinds of things, where you can have clean, which doesn't have the sex, violence, or swearing, but it's not necessarily without the trauma or without the angst. You're just not going to see it on the page. So you might have someone who's struggling with alcoholism, or you might have someone who is promiscuous, but we're not going to show that on the page. I don't need a how-to guide on these scenes. Close the door, let us know what's going on. But we also want to see the characters coming out of that. So if they're going to start in a place where they're struggling and where they're addicted, we want to see them walking through that. How do they come out of that? and just seeing that character growth, but again, without any of the graphic content. One of the authors that I like to reference, if you've read a Charles Martin book, he has some beautiful stories. My personal favorite is, I believe it's Water for My Heart. And if you've never read that book, it's just the most beautiful redemption story without ever mentioning Jesus as your redeemer. It's a fantastic book. So yes, I'm not getting paid by Charles Martin to plug this. But stories like that, where you can see the work, you can see the hand of God, and you can see things happening on people's lives, but you don't have to say, hey, by the way, that was God. So I don't know if that's overly vague or if that helps, but that's what I'm looking for.
Well, no, that's good to know. I think that's a good characterization of where it fits in the clean versus the wholesome. And I can see that in your books too, with how just like it just plays out. And then you do have, I don't know if it's a spoiler, but Jess's brother's dealing with some hard stuff, and you know, there's been disappointment in the past, and yet he's able to make that change. So so your characters have a habit of finding themselves in awkward situations, and now it's time to hold you to task for all the awkwardness that you have written, Karin, and not just your own, because I polled the avid readers of Christian fiction for awkward characters in novels. So you are going to be held to task for all of the ones that were mentioned in the popular Christian fiction. We've compiled a game of Would You Rather.
Awesome. So seeing how, you know, obviously the awkwardness becomes between your hero and heroine, but you've already met your man and you're married. So we'll make it like an awkward thing in front of your pastor. So we're going to ask you some questions, and which would you rather? So would you rather throw up on your pastor's shoes or find yourself stuck under a chair when your pastor comes into the room?
I'm trying to think if I've actually been stuck underneath the chair when the pastors go into the room.
These are situations from other books or maybe yours. Yeah. So some people, if you want to comment on where you think you've seen this situation, that'll be great as well.
Well, so being stuck under a chair sounds familiar. Just for this, I would probably rather be stuck under the chair. I would hate to, you know, ruin anybody's shoes or pants or.
Good choice.
All right. So would you rather have your father, in the name of answering your prayer for a preacher, rob a train, kidnap and lasso the man to present him to you, or accidentally hit or think you've hit your pastor with the SUV, and when you suggest he might have internal bleeding, he answers, the only internal bleeding is going to be the bruise on my bottom from falling on ice?
I'm going to have to go with the SUV.
These are some really weird and awkward questions, but they're actually in some books. So,
that first one, the first one kind of reminds me perhaps of a Karen Whitemeyer book. I'm not sure who suggested that one, but
the first one, the throwing up one.
No, the kidnapping the pastor.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll have to go and look at the references, but I think that's good. If you know any of these, then you should definitely to guess on that one. I have to look at the reference, but maybe we can make a question and answer, like hidden answer in the comments below of what they're actually from.
Okay, so next one. Would you rather have your dog pee on your pastor's foot or get your car stuck in the mud, and by the time your pastor comes to help you, you're also covered in mud?
Well, my pastor is well known for the fact that he and his wife own 6 cars because none of them ever work. So the chance of him ever coming to rescue me out of the mud is slim to none. So we're going to say the dog peeing on his pant leg, because I just can't imagine my faster would ever show up with a working vehicle that would help get me out of mud.
I think the dog peeing just brings them back to off the pedestal. Hey, yeah, stuff happens.
That's funny.
And it was the dog. It was the dog.
My pastor and I are both avid dog lovers as well, so I think he would probably forgive that one.
Yeah, get to see how he responds to that. Yeah.
Let's tag Karen's pastor in this and we'll see what he thinks about all of this. Would you rather be in a book club for over a month and admit you don't remember anyone's name, so you've made up mental nicknames based on appearance, or ride a little pony that hates you?
You know what? I've never actually ridden a pony, so I'm going to go with that one. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I don't know how I would know if the pony hates me. That's so intriguing. I would want to know, how would I know if the pony hates me?
Apparently, it was quite the humorous book. And again, I'll link that one in the, I'll comment down below on where this one, I can't think of it off of the top of my head right now, but.
Well, my question, people will I'm sure there'll be a lot of people recognizing one of these ones because it's from a rom-com, the second one. So put your comments in if you know which book these ones are from. Would you rather have a temperamental mule bite your rear and tear your pants in front of your pastor, or fix a nosebleed with a tampon up your nose in front of your pastor? These are actually in Christian fiction books. Oh dear.
I'm gonna have to go with the nosebleed.
You are going to go with the nosebleed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with the nosebleed. Just
yeah. There's not much of a choice there. They're both pretty bad.
That's funny. Well, yeah, for sure. Leave a comment below if you recognize any of these awkward situations. And then after a bit, I will make sure to put in where they're actually from. And then if there's any more that you can think of that we should have Karin answer, let us know in the comments below for sure. So Karin, tell us something fun, quirky about you that may or may not influence your writing, something that maybe people would be surprised to learn about you.
Yeah, so this was a tricky one because you guys gave me a heads up about this question. And I actually had to ask my sisters, and I even asked my husband. And I'm like, what is something, because I'm pretty open. There's not really a topic that I won't talk about. So there's not anything specifically that influences my writing, but I finally came up with a quirk that's just something weird about me that not many people know. So I can share that with you. As far as influencing my writing, everything does. Anything that I read, anything that I see, any person that I meet, it's just, and anytime somebody says, hey, what's going to happen with that character? Because I'm already thinking now about writing a sequel to Avoiding Marriage because somebody asked me, what happens with Jess's brother? And I'd never even thought about that before. But yes, as far as quirky things that nobody knows, the only thing that I can think of, and now everybody will know, is that I'm a nervous nail clipper, a nervous bored. So like if I get bored or if I'm nervous, I will cut my toenails. And so I have like the tiniest little toenails ever. And my husband has even asked if they're there because I tend to cut them when I get bored or nervous. And so they're just, I never have toenails. So
well,
I can get away from Michigan because, we only wear flip-flops for like 2 or 3 months of the year. And then the rest of the time.
Well, there's transparency for you. It's out there. It's out on YouTube now and Facebook everywhere.
That's the weirdest thing I could think of. Like I said, there's pretty much anything I'll talk about. So weird quirks. If anybody else is, I'm not a nail biter, but if anybody else has, go ahead and share.
There you go. Would you rather be a nail biter or a short nail toe clipper? Okay, exactly. Fair enough. So you mentioned after you've got your Avoiding Marriage coming out, and what's after that? Are you actually plotting out or working on your next one? guess.
No, well, I've got 3 in the works right now. One which was finished, and I submitted it to my agent, and he shopped it around. And while he was doing that, I started reading some craft books again, and I started reading Donald Moss, and I was reading some James Scott Bell, and a book. It's the 12 Fatal Fiction Flaws. And if you've never read it, it's fantastic. And as I was reading those, I'm like, you know what? I think I'd like to take another crack at that manuscript, because even though my agent has it, and he happened to call the next week, he's like, I'm not getting traction. A lot of people are reading it, but nobody's wanting to buy it. So I took it back, and I have, I think, cut 4 chapters. I'm just ripping it apart. So it was done, but it's getting another hard revision. And that is going to be part 1 in a series. The second book is another novella. It'll be about 20,000 words. And then the third book, it's about 3 sisters. So the first one is about the oldest sister. The second one is about the youngest. And then the third one will be about the middle sister. So we've got editing, hopefully final edit. The novella is in hopefully close to the last edit phase. And then I'm still plotting out the third book. So we got to figure out what's going to happen there.
Well, excellent. It sounds like you've got a lot happening and a lot going on. And we appreciate you. You're a good sport. Thanks for thanks for sharing today on Behind the Story. So where is your website? How can readers get a hold of you?
My website is karinbeery.com, and I picked that because everyone said, use your name. Okay, yeah, except for my name is not spelled normally, so nobody can find it. So it is Karin, B as in boy, EERY.com. So if you don't see beer in the middle of my website address, you've spelled it incorrectly. Go back and take the second R out. But you can also find me on Facebook. It's author Karin Beery. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram, but I don't use Instagram a lot. I'm sit at my computer all the time. So there's only so many times you can take a picture of your computer and still have it be interesting. So
fair enough. Cool. All right. Well, we'll have those links. So guys, check out the links below in the comments, and get a copy of Avoiding Marriage. When's the release of that?
It will be out on April 30th. And it's ebook only. So just so everybody, hopefully later in the year, it'll be available hardcover or on paperback. But right now it's only an ebook.
All right. Well, also in the links, Lisa and I have a novella from each of us that you can download. My biblical fiction is On Desolate Heights. It's Balaam's story, and his talking donkey is free for download.
Awesome. And I have my novella, the Act 1 of Polarized Love, which is a rom-com style romance. Also, the Collaborative Press, I'll put a link in there. We have COVID Diaries, which is short stories from our winners. We had a competition last year, and they're inspirational short stories. So we'll put that free one on as well.
And Karin is also offering a free a giveaway for a free copy of Avoiding Marriage. So be sure you click in the link below. We'll have a giveaway platform for that. So thank you so much for joining us today on Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Thanks for joining us.
So thank you again for joining us today on Behind the Story with Naomi and Lisa. Don't forget to click on the links and subscribe to our YouTube channels, and you'll keep up to date with our author interviews. Have a great week. God bless.